Hello, I would like to introduce the Lúbadh version 2.0 firmware, which has been a long time coming, as many people have let me know in the comments and over email, but trust me, it is very much worth the wait. This has been a lot of development behind the scenes on this, which we kind of took COVID as an opportunity to start from scratch, and everything's been rebuilt from the ground up in terms of looping engine. It's a new animal, so for a limited time at least, this is going to be available as an update pack. So let me see what's in the box. There's a new updated Lúbadh V2 quick start guide. So it's got some of the details of the new looping mechanics, updated button combinations, all the fun stuff. And inside the box we also have one of these, which is a little passive USB breakout expander. Comes with USB cable, so this way you can just connect this from the USB port on the back of the Lúbadh, and gives you front access for the USB drive, because the USB drive itself is quite a bit more to it than just the V1. So what else you get in the box? There is going to be a pre-flashed micro SD card. So I mean, the firmware is going to be online for you to download and install, but this just speeds it up. It's pre-flashed, ready to go, and a new white USB drive, which is 8 gigabytes, and this comes with the curated Instruō sample library that is something else we've been working on for the past couple of months, I would say. Yeah, lots of fun samples on this. We're listening to a few of them here. Some weird nature sounds and broken drum loop. Yeah, fun stuff. And of course another trading card in there as well. So yeah, this one I've curated and I've put a Lúbadh card in, but you may or may not get a Lúbadh card in that. It is luck of the draw. So yeah, there's a lot of big changes to the firmware. A lot of new capabilities. The USB drive is a bit more critical in terms of immediacy and use. So there's a system of presets. So there are 10 factory presets that ship, and they're preloaded on the USB drive. Although a fresh drive, you just plug it in and it will automatically generate the file and format structure for where the preset text files need to go. There will be a deep dive video going through how to work with the presets to come. Yeah, I don't know if that will make it into this video specifically, because this is already going to be pretty long. I think I might break my record. We shall see. Yeah, it's I'll dive right in, because there'll probably be a section where I'm talking through kind of the core changes so far in the Lúbadh, and then yeah, I've broken down this video into examples of each of the different presets. So hope you enjoy. Cheers. So what's new with the version 2.0 firmware? Quite a lot. It's been a big job, a long process, and I mean there was actually a version 2 ready at some point a while ago now. I think this will have been the first round of people hearing about a version 2 firmware. So that was essentially more features built upon the V1 engine, which it never felt quite right in terms of what we knew the hardware was going to be capable of. So yeah, we basically just took it back to the drawing board, and Cian just locked himself in a room and programmed for the last 2 years or so. But it's incredible what him and Finn and Murdo have been able to do in terms of software and capabilities on this this module. So same hardware, it's very recognizable. A lot of the button combinations, the features will be familiar, but there are a few core changes that I'm going to cover first in this section before the video goes on and deep dives on the specifics of the various presets. So you can see on this one we've got empty deck on the left. This one's looping. The classic key button combination, which goes between standard operation, delay mode, tape decay mode, that is now a thing of the past. So we've restructured how this functions. There's no more differentiation between delay mode versus tape decay mode. It's kind of all being combined into one, and there's a lot more flexibility that comes from this. So a lot of these features, as I go through the various presets and detail how they operate, a lot of these aspects key commands, I'll be using them throughout this video. And of course it's all well detailed in the user manual, the new quick start guide. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of documentation out there. So this is the fundamental difference to the top layer controls. We have standard operations. We've got 3 different functions for the time pot. So the default being the classic clock divisions. So that's very much the same in terms of operations, although now there's a 0 clock divisions option, so it now produces no clock output when that's set. The way the clocks are derived, everything is so much tighter, so you can be looping, you can be running really fast, and it's yeah, so the way that the clocks are derived from the looping engine, it's much more integral to the core mechanics of the software engine. So everything is very tight in comparison to the V1. So that's a set and forget parameter. You can use time pot. You could, if it's set to no yellow LED, then the CV input for time, that will adjust that and just sums with the pot position. So you can still dynamically control the clock divisions if needed. Second time pot function, if I go into static yellow, the parameter now needs a pickup, so as you adjust it, you're adding dub level, so all the way down. And if you're recording, so say I have the shorter loop going like this, and it's recording, it's going to be constantly wiping over itself. But if I bring up dub level, it's going to be adding a degree of sound on sound. So the more level there is, the more it's going to record on top of the pre-existing audio. So that's where delay mode, there doesn't need to be a differentiation between it, because normal mode is delay mode now. You just bring up a degree of dub level. Yeah, it makes things much more organic, much more flexible. So that's a set and forget parameter. Let me go back to clock divisions, take that off, just so it's not blinking at us. Okay, so static yellow is dub level. Pulsing yellow, this is our time pot 3 mode, and this is what's going to vary preset to preset. So there's essentially a user definable preset that this control can be mapped to, and it varies preset to preset, of course. The most common one, I think, is going to be the tape emulation, which is that's been a research project in itself. Cian's really done a deep dive on the various parameters of tape machine and what happens when you're degrading tape, or how fluctuations can be introduced into the audio signal path when you're working with analog tape. So it's yeah, a really musical application in here. So if it's a preset that uses tape emulation, then time pot all the way down, it's scaling multiple parameters in parallel. So the more time pot's up, the more tape emulation that's applied. Certain other presets, there's other parameters that the time pot 3 function is mapped to. Another common one is crossfade duration. So everything is much smoother and cleaner overall with the looping engine, so there's much more precision to crossfades and enveloping. So if there's in certain presets, you can control the crossfade amount, so you can get things really smooth or really articulate. Yeah, there's a lot. I'll be going through this step by step, but yeah, I think that in a nutshell that kind of covers the bulk of it, like that main mechanic. A lot of the key combinations have stayed very much the same, so you know, holding that, pressing erase, that will change it to between one shot and looping playheads, or holding retrig, pressing the opposite deck's record button, that will set it to one shot record mode, like that. There we go, back to looping tape head, playback. Yeah, the other addition is the file management system, which I'll get into in one of the preset examples, showing how to navigate the file loading system. Saving files, you can at any point you could press retrig, erase, and then record, and that will save the audio to a 13th. There are 12 folders of 12 samples, but there's a 13th folder which is the saved audio folder. And when you're exporting audio like that, it's accessible on the fly. So if you're loading something, you can visualize folders here on the left. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Or you can go down to 0, in which case you can select up to 12 files accessible from that. When you're saving more files in this way, it will increment the number. So basically, it's going to be the 12 most recent saved samples that will be available from the folder 0. Yeah, I think I'll stop talking here and start talking elsewhere, and we'll start seeing the new looping engine in action. Hope you enjoy. So here we have the out-of-the-box default behavior of the looper V2 firmware. So this is a preset that we've called tape looper, and it kind of features all the details that align with what our original intentions were when developing the looper as a module, as an instrument. And generally, it's very similar to the V1 in a lot of ways, at the top level control schemes, but there are some new fundamental mechanics that are in the works under the hood in the rebuilt audio engine that we're pretty excited about. So yeah, this is going to allow for like reversal dubbing, lots of pitch variation control, which kind of falls more in line with the true behavior of tape recording. Yeah, you'll see I'm holding a guitar. So this, I figured this was going to be a nice, very clear way to see a sound source being played in, and then what the mechanics of the looper are actually doing in practice. Yeah, just keep things a bit very, very clear cut what's happening, because there's a lot to show off. Control wise, I've got a ladder down here in the bottom right of the case, so that cable is going down to foot controller. And that's giving me control with the A pedal and B pedal over record, start and stop, and the B pedal is going to erase on the expander. So start, stop, and erase. Classic controls for a functional looper, in this case being hands-free, so I can play in chords. So content-wise, there's a little major progression I've been noodling with a bit. So it's a D major 7th going down to a B flat major 7th, and I'm just going to build that in, build it up, and layer in different aspects, and we'll see how the mechanics work in context. So here we go. So this is going to be very familiar in terms of control scheme. We've got variable loop length and offset start position. So as you can hear, as I'm just scrubbing through just now, this preset's got very smooth response behavior. So there's a default crossfade duration of 50 milliseconds in this preset, but a lot of the details, a lot of the fine-tuning parameters can be modified. So you can just open up the preset file and tweak a lot of the variables to get it tailored to any really specific context. But we've found a really nice range of sweet spots, I think, for these 10 stock presets that cover all the bases that we could think of when developing and beta testing with it. Okay, let's move up to the speed control. So this is much the same. We've got through zero speed direction. The LED indicator, this will light when it's at the stalled position. Half speed playback. Original speed. 2 times speed. 4 times speed. And the same in reverse. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to set it to 2 times speed in reverse. To get that really precisely dialed in, I can press and hold the retrig button as a shift, and then pick the notch that I want, release the button, and it's going to snap to that exactly. So now I know it's exactly in tune at that playback speed. So I want to go to 2 times speed forward. There we go. So I'm going to dub in and just oscillate between the root note of these 2 chords. So it should be quite immediately apparent what's different with this new firmware build. We're hearing the original loop that I've played. It's still playing back at 2 times speed in reverse, but this new take that I've dubbed over, we're actually hearing that playing back as I played it in. So this is the variable record speed in action, where if we imagine this as being analogous to actual analog tape. So we recorded in the first loop, we then flipped the tape, reversed it, and we're playing that back at twice the speed. So it means we're hearing everything played back twice the speed, but as we record, we're just recording at a faster tape speed over the top. So this means that if I return to our original playback speed and direction, we're going to be hearing that as I played it in originally. But underneath we've got this dubbed root note bass line, which is now actually a bass line because it's dropped down by an octave due to that variable record speed and reversal. So you can see it's going to open up a lot of possibilities with how to work with this as a live looper. I'm going to do a brief tangent. I'm going to jump over to this second looper here, which I currently have set up as a demonstration of what we're calling the classic preset. So this is it now matching in spec almost identically. So classic preset, this is to recreate the fixed record speed behavior of the V1 firmware. So I'll record in the same progression. Same as we'd expect. It's that same 50 milliseconds crossfade window. Now, if I go back to same approach, in reverse, 2 times speed. And I'm going to do the same action. I'm going to overdub this oscillation between root notes. You can see I'm timing it so that it's at the start of each chord, which is actually the end of each chord in reverse. So my first chord is going to start when the the playhead hits the bottom of the reel. So I'll time it so that I start dubbing when the playhead reaches there. So that should have been quite clear that something different was happening mechanically. As I started recording, overdubbing, we stopped seeing the playhead indicator and it switched to showing the record head, which is the traditional V1 behavior. So it was actually recording in at real-time original direction, and what we're hearing now is that dubbed take played in reverse over the original take. So go back to original speed, original direction. So you hear those bass notes played real time forward direction. So this classic mode, it offers a lot of its own possibilities and techniques, where I'll shorten it down to a quarter length. I'm going to go to my dub level and reduce it all the way down and start recording in. So this way it's writing over the tape. So if I play in now, I'm getting a one-shot loop essentially of it. So if I take this back to reverse at 2 times speed and play something in, we've got that playback delay and reversal. So whatever's captured to the buffer is recording in original direction. So we've essentially got pitch shifting delay. Pitch shifting delay techniques, but that's quite specific in terms of capability and functionality to the fixed record head direction, which is built into the classic preset. So let's jump back to our tape looper preset, and I'm going to build this loop back up. Oops, volume up would help. There's reverse speed. This is us back to foundation loop, chords with bass, and playing in original speed with the dubbed version down an octave. So I'm going to add more to this, and what I'm going to play is the first inversion chords of this chord progression, but I'm going to dub that in at half speed. now hear that new dub layer playing as I played it in over this half-speed playback of the original. Now let's go back to original playback speed. It's almost got a 12-string type octave tone, although it's a diatonic harmonization of the chord voicings over the top, but quite a nice technique, sort of filling out the foundation of the loop. Something that's a bit more like a melodic lead tone, and play this A over the start of the first chord, and I'm going to capture it in, pluck the note, but I'm then going to manually modulate the speed parameter, and this is going to give us a new effect. Hear that on playback. You can hear there's modulation and wobble to that note. Modulation LFO as my method of adjusting the speed. So this is triangle LFO from the oct through a 1F into the speed control. So I'm going to be playing in a note. I'll play it as this octave unison. Static D, and then start to get that wobble as it's overdubbed. So what we're hearing in playback, it's actually almost the inverse of what we hear on recording, where as I was recording, I would play the note, we'd hear that static in its original form, but then the backing would wobble as I brought up the speed modulation. But in playback, the speed is now static throughout playback, so it's the record head that was modulated during that dub. So that's where we've managed to capture that as an artifact. It makes for some very interesting, tape techniques that definitely new to the looper in terms of functionality. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear this deck, and let's have a listen to the looper's built-in tape emulation feature. So on the tape looper preset, the time pot 3 parameter, when the LED's pulsing yellow, this is tape emulation. And we'll listen to it just a dry comparison, or wet-dry comparison. So this is the dry signal, and I'll bring it to maximum. You can hear everything's just softened a bit. There's a reduction in amplitude. There's also a reduction in filtering, or an increase in filtering. So there's high pass and low pass filtering applied, as well as various other parameters. So this has been a deep dive topic of research that Cian's been undertaking over the last couple of years. So implemented into the looping mechanic, we've got parameters that are definable for depth of wow and flutter. There's crinkle depth, there's tape age, tape wear, and hysteresis. So all these parameters scale dynamically with this time pot control. The maximum values, they're curated for this preset, but they're accessible under the hood, so you can really get in and fine tune the character of tape emulation as needed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep tape emulation on full and record in the same chord progression. So in playback, the tape emulation is much more evident, where we've got instability and a bit of warble as it's playing. So the tape emulation algorithm is actually distributed at various points across the looping signal flow. So there's a combination of some applied on the input into the record head ultimately, and if you're dubbing, if you've got a layer of overdub or a level of overdub defined, then that's going to feed back into it. So if you just keep recording over it, it's going to compound and degrade over time. But likewise, on the output of the playhead, there's an additional, the other half of the tape emulation's applied. So it means that if you load in a really clean sample via the USB drive, you can bring up tape emulation, and it's going to apply a bit of warmth and degradation over time to that signal. I'll record in just a single chord. Keep overdub all the way full, keep tape emulation up full, and I'm just going to let this record over itself, and we'll hear that compounding effect of tape emulation and degradation. Especially the melody there, you can hear the notes start to wobble a little bit. Stop recording, I'll keep it playing back, and I'm going to remove the tape emulation, so we're just hearing direct playback from the reel, and it's noticeably more distorted, more compressed, more aged. Saturating over time. I'll clear this again, and I'm going to just play in a single strum of this D major 7th. So this is now just playing back what I played in, but with tape emulation turned all the way up. So if I now play this as a duplicate over the top, you can really hear that modulation to the wow and flutter, where it's truly emulating the classic flanger effect. Because we've got slight movement of the playback, so we've got modulation in pitch of the duplicate, which is going to phase against the original dry signal. So I can actually use this as a technique where if I record in a short loop, I bring that down even shorter and keep overdub running continually. Take my dub level all the way down. So this way, with no dub level applied, it's not going to keep layering up, it's going to be writing over the virtual tape on every pass. And because this is playing quite quickly, we're just going to have an offset delayed duplicate of the source audio. And we can hear it's very much an analog sounding flange effect. If I take the emulation off, we hear it more as that slapback. Then introducing the tape emulation, that modulation over playback pitch is really coming into its own as a flanging character. There's actually another way to get this effect in practice. Let's see if I can get this in a sweet spot. I'll take tape emulation all the way down, so we're just hearing it as that sort of slapback. And I've got an LFO, just a slow triangle, that I'm going to patch to the speed. The depth down a bit. There we go. So maybe a bit more of an aggressive flanging effect. Getting the sweet spot of rate of modulation and depth of modulation. You also need to have the speed at an optimum position so that it's modulating above and below that point. So it is a very accurate digital model of analog tape recording in an implementation that is mimicking that classic flange effect where you're using a tape reel duplicate between two parallel reels and then using the flange to vary the playback speed. Yeah, a fun patch to play with. Let's dive into some more presets. So next up, we've got the clean preset, which is functionally very close to the tape looper preset, but as the name would suggest, it's clean. So what we mean by that is there's no tape emulation applied. There's no analog modeling under the hood, so it tracks it in as pure a form as it possibly can. So the looper, of course, the input stage having its analog preamp stage, which is always going to be there, and that's always adds that level of protection to never getting into a digital clipping scenario. But with the clean preset, it's going to be capturing that with no additional modeling applied. The other key factor of this preset is the time pot 3 mode, which gives you not control over tape emulation like in the tape looper preset, but this one gives you top level dynamic control over crossfade durations. So this allows for some really smooth capturing and overdubbing with very minimal artifacts. So before I start, I'm going to set my dub level all the way up. So if I am recording overdubbing, it's going to be full sound on sound. And I'll just set the time pot 3 in the middle for the crossfade durations to start with. So I'm patching into the right deck, and I'm monitoring from the aux output. This way I can crossfade between the two decks as needed. Sound source, I've got a self-oscillating 1047 here, so that's just giving me a nice clean pure test tone sine wave, because what better to demonstrate a clean channel than using a very clean sine tone. So yeah, let's capture something in. So essentially what I've done now is created an obtusely long wavetable oscillator of a sine wave. Yeah, let's see what we can do with the looper specifically in this context. Slow it down a bit. I'm going to reduce time pot 3 all the way down so that we have 0 crossfade duration. And as you can hear, depending on where I am in the buffer and what the source audio is, if it's something that could land on a non-zero crossing, we're going to get a click. Which may of course be what's desired. Like say you're working with audio that is very high in transients, then you might want to retain that level of precision, that level of clarity of having no crossfade, so you've got really articulate loop points, because the aggressive aspect might be what you're looking for. But let's play with the crossfade duration. So all the way down is 0, and I can bring that up to a maximum of 250 millisecond crossfade duration. There we are. So even when I'm in a really short loop length, I can be scrubbing through the buffer, and it's completely removed that zippering sound. There we go, 0 crossfades with crossfades. So yeah, so if you're working with audio that is very pad-like, very gentle, then you've got this ability with the clean preset to get things into a really smooth territory. Cool, okay, let's build this up a bit more. I'm going to reverse it. There we go, let's tune it to a perfect fifth. So this is unchanged fundamental pitch coming in. And I've dubbed that in at a perfect fifth ratio. So now when I re-pitch it or redirect it, I've got sort of a smooth tuned dyad. So I had crossfades all the way up, so that's a really nice smooth overdub I've achieved. Let's see if I can get this to a... There we go. Let's go up a minor third plus an octave. As you can hear, as I was dubbing that over, I just punched it in, or not punching record, but just toggled on and off the record head. It's kept it all nice and smooth. If I want articulation between the loop points, then I can just bring the crossfade duration down. Okay, let's see what else we can do with this this preset. I'm going to bounce over to the left deck, bring up some level. I'm going to start off, I'll set this to being a little bit of overdub. So the goal of this, I'm going to use this as a delay. So I want a bit of overdub up, because that will give me feedback amount. And let's go in the middle for the crossfade duration. And I want this constantly recording. my aux output, then I'll hear a combination of dry and wet. Let's go back to dub level. That distinctive through zero whip when I change the speed of the record and playhead together. So it can be quite a nice preset mode for compositional techniques like this. There we go, that's quite a nice spot. So I've got a clickiness on the original playback. You can hear for the delay time is defined by two factors. There's the length of the active loop that will shorten the delay time because there's less distance for the, less length of tape, but you can also vary the record and playback speed, where the faster it's moving, same length of tape, but you get a different delay time and duration. And with dub level up a bit, we're getting that feedback cascaded like echo. But regardless of what direction or speed I set it at, it normalizes. So it just becomes a delay. That you're hearing the delays in a traditional like original direction, regardless of the direction of the actual record and playheads. So this is quite an interesting aspect and detail of the Varispeed record capabilities of the V2 firmware on the looper. On the V1, it would, when you were recording, it was always recording in real-time forward direction. With this, we've gained the capability of how tape behaves, where if you record a loop, say 10 seconds, so you record 10 seconds of audio, if you then play that back at 20 at half speed, you've gained it, you've doubled the length, so you've got 20 seconds of playback. If you then record into that, if it's very speed recording, then you've now got a 20-second loop that you can work with in terms of audio buffer. So the same thing applies here, but because it's a digital platform, you're essentially moving that Nyquist frequency. Like you're setting that limit of sample rate. So if we're playing back at half speed, then we're gaining twice the length, but we've also halved the Nyquist point, so we've halved the sample rate. And this sample rate is completely dynamic as you're varying the speed control. So there's a lot going on under the hood here, but it does mean that you theoretically and technically do gain considerably more potential record length. So the fundamental record length of a deck on the looper now is 10 minutes, but say we were to record in a full 10-minute block, full deck of 10 minutes, slow down the speed control so that we're at a crawl, like either forward or backwards, doesn't matter either way. But if you're recording that in at the slowest speed over 10 minutes, then the theoretical sample rate, the lowest it can get to in a bipolar Varispeed control preset is 100 hertz of sample rate. So not the most useful, because it means that your Nyquist frequency is going to be 50 hertz. So that's the highest frequency you could realistically capture and reproduce. But if you run the numbers, then I think that amounts to 10 minutes divided by... Yeah, so you gain, from 10 minutes record time, you can now get 5 hours of recording time with a maximum frequency of 50 Hertz, which is not particularly useful. To push that further, if you go to one of the preset modes that uses the volt per octave tracking as opposed to Varispeed, we basically gain extra resolution over the range of the speed pot, because all the way up's the fastest, and it'll go down to stalling, but it's always going to be one direction, either forward or reverse. You don't have that through 0 stage. So we can actually get that down to a sample rate, theoretically, of 14 Hertz, giving us a Nyquist point of 7 Hertz, which is even less useful, because it means, we're in sub-audio there. So 7 Hertz, so you could record that for a considerably longer period of time, which mathematically works out at being 23.148 days of record time, if you so wished, but with a Nyquist frequency of 7 Hertz. So anything 7 Hertz and below is all you could capture. The inputs and outputs of the looper itself are actually AC coupled, so that's going to be filtered out anyway. So it's in practice, it is not actually that useful, but it was a fun calculation to run. So that's the theoretical maximum record time of 23.148 days of the looper. Although you wouldn't actually be able to capture anything of any real use. But it was useful running these numbers, just theoretically going through the mechanics of it, because it now emulates that true tape recording behavior. We gain length of record time. So what I'll do now, I'm going to take my dub level all the way down. And record this at a lower speed. Stop recording now. There we go, recorded that in. I'll stop that, mute my input. You can hear I captured in the audio, but we're starting to hear some aliasing there. So this is quite an extreme use case, where the engine works, it's fully dynamic going through 0. So as the Nyquist frequency drops, there are dynamic anti-aliasing filters built into the engine. So it means that it's removing stuff down, like, there are going to be like low level, like absurd positions you could set this to, and you'd start to hear some degree of aliasing. But this was recorded at a pretty low speed, and it's still captured with enough resolution to be quite recognizable. So yeah, you could use it in a way to do sample rate reduction over sampling audio. So capture in drum voices, percussion hits, and you can use it as a way of emulating some of these classic samplers where they're reducing sample rate actively. Okay, I'll jump back over to my main loop. A feature that has carried over from the V1, which I've not shown yet in the tape looping behavior. If I can punch record, which will ignore the defined crossfade duration. So punch record is always going to be very aggressively. It's just going to like punch in without overdubbing. Well, replacing audio, so it's just going to be directly replacing. So at the moment I've got my sine wave stalled, muted. So I'm going to hold a raise, tap record, and that's going to punch in elements of silence. So it can be quite a nice way to create rhythmic patterns within a static loop. Just punch in silence. So if I now go back over to my delay voice, bring up dub level. So I can get mismatching ratios of delay time, so I can get these sort of cascading patterns. Yeah, a very interesting compositional tool, taking advantage of Varispeed recording and with the ability to keep things nice and smooth and clean, or keeping things very sharp and articulate. That's the clean preset. Next up, I'm going to show off the Clockable preset of the looper. So this introduces quite a number of new features, which fundamentally it gives the ability to externally clock a tempo or playback BPM of a loop from a clock signal, from external BPM. So you can patch a clock, so say it's from a square wave oscillator, into the record input jack. So this gets repurposed as the clock input in this mode. To demonstrate the preset, I'm going to be using some drum loops, which there are 2 folders worth of drum loops that are included with the Instruō sample library. So this is a 144 sample pack that we've curated and produced for the Lúbadh V2 launch. So to start with, I'm going to show the sample loading mechanics a bit. So we'll just patch up an audio out. We'll work with the left loop, I think. So to access the samples, whatever deck you're on, you press and hold the retrig button and tap erase, and this will enter the file management system. There are 12 folders of 12 samples. Whatever deck you're loading on, it will display the sample number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And on the opposite deck, it's giving folder numbers. So it will actually go down to 0. So folder number 0 is the saved files folder. So if you capture a loop, save it to the USB drive, it will save it to the folder 0. And it will increment the number each time. So it will always be the 12 most recent samples that are available. So we can see that there's 1 sample currently in folder 0. So let's listen to that. If I press and hold the retrig button, it will do a brief addition. So it will basically stream or load the first 5 seconds of a sample and play it back. There we go. So that's the guitar-based loop that I built up in the tape looping preset. So let's have a quick look, see what there is. So the first 2 folders are a collection of drum loops. So we had some fun. We spent a good few weeks miking up all the various drum sets in the building, and some really nicely produced drum loops. Folder 2, these are process drum loops. This one, sample 6, folder 2, I'm going to be using for the bulk of the demonstration. Doesn't sound particularly affected when it's listened to in mono, but we'll hear what's going on in the stereo domain shortly. lots of compression on that one. I'll just run through and do a jump cut sequence of an example of some of the samples on here. So with the V2 firmware, we actually have true stereo functionality with the looper. So if you're capturing in with the decks linked, it will actually record in true stereo between the two decks, and you can save that as a stereo sample. And they're truly sample locked, whereas the V1, the two decks were by design running on independent processor cores. So there was actual independence between the two decks. But now if you link them, you get actual true stereo playback. So I'll patch up my second channel. I've linked the two decks, and I'm going to load sample 6 of folder 2. So to load, I just press the record button, and that will pull the sample into the two decks in this case. There we go. So if you're listening to this playback with headphones or through a good stereo monitoring setup, then you should actually hear the effect aspect of this loop. Just for comparison, I'm going to patch in mono and just do a mono sum from both. You can hear there's extra elements of this that we now lose. So left this quirk of this stereo affected drum loop in by design, because it was processed through an old analog desk that has a spring reverb, but being a stereo spring reverb effect, it's just a single spring. So they just do a bit of phase cancellation or phase inversion between the two channels. So when you're listening in, a proper stereo setup, you can get some interesting spatialization effects from it. But yeah, it's quite a fun groove to work with. So this is both decks linked, so it's playing back properly in stereo. The controls sync to the left deck, so this defines the start and length of both channels simultaneously. If I unlink, then I've actually got true independence of the left and right channels. Then at any point I could relink them, and they snap back to alignment. Yeah, pretty fun. Cool. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull my other channel, and we're just going to work with this ultimately in mono, because a lot of the times you'll be using the two decks independently. So I'll unlink this. Here we go. Okay, so speed controls in the Clockable preset. There are actually 3 different ways that you can interact with the playback speed. So first one I've been using is just the top level speed control. This is a typical bipolar, up to 4 times forward, 4 times back. The LED indicator shows the precise ratios of 2 times, 4 times, half time, stalled. There's actually now a very quick way to dial in a playback tempo, which is tap tempo. So the button combo of erase and record, this in a lot of other presets is the traditional punch record feature that was in the V1. In the Clockable preset, this is now the tap tempo. So holding erase, tapping record, that will read it as a tap tempo. There is a bit of a conundrum when it comes to tap tempo over a variable length and playback loop. So if I tap in a delta time, a BPM, what does that mean in the context of the loop? So there's a bit of definition that's actually needed, and this is actually done via the time pot, so the clock divisions. So we can see if I set this to being 1 clock division, we'll get a clock pulse on the head of the loop. There we go. The divisions, they are extrapolated based on the valid playback length. So if I shorten the length, then I'm getting a pulse every reset of that one shot, or looping segment of the loop. So this pulse of one division is actually now my tap tempo definition. So if I hold a raise, I can tap in a new speed, and that rate and playback speed is now it's matching what I've tapped in. If I go to a longer loop, then of course if I tap in faster, it's going to max out the playback speed. So to get around this, we define a higher division of pulses. So here I've got that set to 16ths. So I'll slow this down to near stalling, and then if I tap in, the BPM, so there we go. So I can very quickly dial in a playback tempo. So it's very much designed as a quick set and forget. So okay, I know what tempo I want to go in. So and it's dependent upon what division you set it to. So if set it slower, so this is just giving me a pulse every measure. You might know that tempo instead. So it gives a lot more hands-on control over the tempo. So yeah, that's one thing to bear in mind, is the clock divisions defines the tempo subdivision for the tap tempo. Cool. Tap tempo, we've got Varispeed. The primary way of interfacing with the external clocking is with an external clock pulse. So this is similar in terms of mechanics. There needs to be an extrapolated subdivision over the total length of the loop. By default, for this preset, that's 64 divisions with an averaging of 4. So whatever the maximum loop length is of your audio, that's divided up into 64, and that delta time between a 64th division is the clock rate that it needs to define the tempo. So it's quite a similar mechanic to a lot of other clock modules out there that require a higher rate clock that then extrapolates down. So a good way to demonstrate this, I think, is if I use my left deck, which is currently playing the original channel. I'm going to set the clock divisions up to the maximum, up to 64. And what I can do, just to give us an audible reference, I'll use that clock out and I'll just ping a 1047 filter, and we can hear that as essentially as a metronome. Let's put that into the Karn. There we go, that's our BPM. So if I now go over and listen to our unsynced second deck from the same clock output and patch it to my clock input, it matches up. So what I'll try and do here, I'm going to try and reset both decks, re-trigger them at the same time. So I'll slow down the left deck, which is my clock source externally clocking the right deck. So in this case, it's always going to lag behind a bit because it's taking a 64th pulse and it's an averaging of 4 pulses. But you can actually use that as an interesting effect and get a sort of phasing, misaligned match. think for demonstrating this in a more, in the way that you'll more likely use it, matching the decks without using link is not going to give you the tightest alignment. But I'm going to use the square wave from this TSL. So here you can hear the clock pulse as the metronome. And it's you can hear it's pretty responsive for catching up and following a tempo. Okay, so there's a pretty cool feature here. I'll mute the metronome now. I've got my tempo defined by my TSL, so I can tune that by ear approximately to get it to original playback speed. If I now interact with the speed control directly on the module, anytime this parameter's in motion, it will take over until it remains static, in which case it only needs a few clock pulses of the 64th division to then regain the external clock's tempo. So a fun trick that I've utilised quite recently in a patch is I'm going to patch from my gate output from the Lubadh. That'll be going from button A here, and I'll patch that to retrig. So I've now got button control for retrigging. So now if I manually scrub, I can retime and get it locked back in tempo by resetting it manually. So you can kind of get that, slowed down record scratch type effect. Yeah, it's a pretty fun trick having access to both these parameters simultaneously. What else is quite a nice touch is if you're using a clock source, like I'm using the TSL here, I'm using the center switch position for the square wave, so that's actually a sub-octave of the fundamental frequency, so I could immediately jump up to double time or half time it. Okay, while I've got this clocked drum loop patch going, I'm going to show another new feature that's a global feature actually to the Lúbadh V2, but it works very nicely in the context of a 4 bars of 4/4 type drum groove, and that is quantization over playback start and length controls. So you can see, as it's a consistent rhythmic loop, I might want to shorten it to just 1 bar, but it can take a bit of fine tuning to get that bang on. So now if I hold retrig as shift and turn the time pot, I get the same division interface that's reminiscent of the clock division output. So if I have it set to 0, then that's no quantization, so it's smooth trimming and offset of start and length. And we set it to 2. So now, all the way up, and I've got full loop. If I bring it down, it's going to split it perfectly in half. So this being a very quantized drum loop already, then I can half it down to 2 measures only. To 4 divisions. So here I can perfectly quarter the loop and lock it down to just a single measure. And this will go up to quite fine divisions. So that's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So it's pairs of 2, but this quantization grid can be tweaked further within the config file, so you can actually get more odd number divisions if desired. So here's a trick that this allows for. I've got it set to 1 clock pulse per loop, and I'm going to use that clock pulse to clock my sample and hold down here. I can then use that random CV to offset my start position. So for this type of drum groove, I can actually get a timed method of essentially remixing the bipolar voltage, so swinging start back and forth. So there is a base level of slew, so this is going to depend a lot on what tempo you're at and how tightly you curate your voltage jumps. But you can see the utility in this, how you can externally control and quantize and lock the divisions to a grid. And yeah, this feature, the shift and time pot for quantized start and length, this applies across all presets. So this is a new global feature addition, which is pretty useful. Got the guitar out again. So this section is going to be looking at the multi-tape preset, which multi-tape, multi-tap might give a bit of a clue as to what's to come. Yeah, there's some pretty substantial features added into this mode, and let's go. I've got this patched up. So I've got guitar going in, monitoring from the aux output. I've got a ladder set up, so I'm going to be using the A button and B button for a couple of different features of this. So sound-wise, what I'm going to work with as a demo is a little minor ostinato. I'm going to loop that into the looper. The way I'm going to do this, it's kind of showing another trick where I'm going to start with a pre-curated length of loop and then dub into that, and that way I can use the clock divisions as a tempo reference, as a master clock. So let me capture in my blank take. There we go. I'll set my clock divisions to 8, and then I've got 1047 here patched to the Karn, and if I come from my clock output, patch that. There we go. I've essentially got a metronome. Just like that. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Seem to have tape emulation on. Let's take that off. I'll also take off any overdub level. Here we go. See if that's a clean take. It's a bit softer on the start. I'll dub it once more. That. That'll do. Close enough for jazz. Okay, I'll just remove this clock just now. And I'm going to patch up my A button of the Lúbadh and put that to the retrig input. So, multi-tape. This is a 4-tap or 4 parallel playhead multi-tap delay mode. So I've now got B button set to erase and A button set to retrigger. So this gives me some remote control over triggering taps or removing taps. So this can also be done on the module itself, where if I hold erase, press retrig, that will remove a tap and it will remove it from the oldest tap. So if I trigger one, trigger another, the display is always going to show the most recent tap and its location, its position in the buffer. If I want to remove one, I can hold erase, press retrigger. You see, as I get down to just one tap left, the speed indicator will blink to indicate that you're on to one tap remaining. So it's now just a single tap loop. So this is very much inspired by like a space echo or a copycat delay, where that's an actual fixed length of tape, fixed recorded, and then multiple playheads. So you record a signal in, and then you're getting equal spacing distribution of the playheads. So the speed of the tape determines the delay time and distance between playheads. So speed will of course affect that in the same way. But fundamentally, the taps can be triggered at any spacing, completely free time. So kill all these. You can get any complex pattern of delay distribution, of a tap distribution for this delay. But if you do want equal spacing of it, then there's some fun tricks to work with. So I'm going to self-patch the looper, where I'm going to use the clock output as my means of determining a clock pulse for triggering grains. So let me kill all the taps. I'm going to patch my clock output to my retrig input and trigger a grain. Trigger a tape head. So now every quarter duration of this loop, it's going to be triggering a playhead. If I want to then have it play for the full duration, I simply unpatch my clock and I've got control over how the tape heads are distributed. So let's go with something faster. So this is clock division of 8, so I've got 8 divisions of my loop length. We're hearing just that same section repeating because every 1/8 of the loop duration is triggering a new playhead, which is moving around, but there are only 4, so it's going to be like bunched up in that starting section. So if I unpatch my clock, then these 4 playheads that are distributed at an 1/8 division of the master length are now moving around the full buffer together. And then for sort of triplet fields, I could go to a division of 6 or 3. Kill all the taps and let's start fresh. We've got that 3/2 type feel. We could also go with 6s. So again, because this is a shorter division duration compared to the number of taps, once I've defined that spacing of playheads, I can then remove the clock source, and that's going to let them all play out through the whole length of the loop. So control wise, we have same as the standard tape looper preset, where time pot 2 is dub level, time pot 3 is tape emulation, which as this is playing back, we're getting a lot of nice character and phasing. It kind of softens everything, keeps it a bit more analog on the playback. Let's work with this as a sort of more real-time delay. I'm going to do a trick here. I'm going to use my grid quantization, quantize to 4, so I can shorten my loop to exact quarters or half. So kill all the taps, and I'm going to use a clock division of 4. So this will be clock division of 4 of that half length. So everything will just be a little bit faster overall. So let's trigger that. Remove my clock, and now it records. So I'm constantly going to be overdubbing now. We can hear the playhead distribution, where we hear the original sound and then the 4 taps from it. So we hear the 4 playheads. I'm going to keep my clock patched. And let's play about with the different divisions. So I set to 3. Try 6s. Back to 4 taps, and I'm going to play about with the dub level. So if I bring that up a bit, because there's 4 playheads, it means that there's going to be more content that it's layering on top of. So a little can go a long way in this case. So that's going to really nicely sustain at the spacing of the taps. Dub level down a bit, and I'm going to turn up a little bit of tape emulation, maybe about 1/3. A bit less. It's getting that sort of nice warbly detuning, but again, I'll go on less is more, a bit more subtlety. I'll reduce the dub level as well. Okay, let's speed things up a bit, because I've got it quantized to a groove 4. Then this is I'll just leave my clock in, so that's going to be continually firing the grains or playheads. Let's go a bit more extreme with the sustaining. Bring dub level up. And I've got a nice sustaining bed of what I play in. Well, as I'm going, I can now adjust the playback speed. That's me going to 2 times speed. Go to half times speed. Back to original. In here it's doubling and halving the spacing between taps, because we're essentially modulating the speed at which the tape's moving through recorded into the multiple playheads. And this also works going into reverse. But then as we've reversed the tape, it's just that first pass of content that's recorded to it, that's overdubbed to it, that is playing back in reverse. So there's an ability to play with it as a repeat sustainer. Let's bump the tape emulation up a bit more, get a bit more degradation to the sound. So far I've been using the retrig as shift and then turning the speed pot, and that's giving me locking to the notches. But the whole thing's dynamic, of course. Dub level down a bit. Because I'm using the Lúbadh as my means of getting the guitar signal in, I can take advantage of the envelope follower. So I'm going to use my envelope follower that will produce a trigger or gate pulse if I play a note that is above a certain amplitude threshold. I'm going to use that to clock my sample and hold. Patch that into my speed. Take my clocking signal out, so I've already got all four grains or playheads playing. A bit more analog. I'll increase tape emulation all the way up. Let's add a bit more dub level. Looking here, as it randomizes the speed and direction, it very quickly normalizes, so you get that quick warble as it changes, and that's because we've got a constant recording and it's overdubbing its Varispeed record, so we're getting that consistency of after it's dubbed over a couple of times, we've caught up and we've normalized the pitch and speed. So as long as I play gently, I can just have it sustain and stay within this tempo.
Speaking of tempo, let's go away from the sort of randomization and let's go back to our metronome sound just briefly. So I'm going to come from a TSL that's running pretty fast. So the external clocking, this is the same implementation where it's defaults to a division of 64. So it's 64ths of the playback length that defines the speed. Mute the click. Yeah, a very dynamic way to play with the tempo. So there are some interesting differences between the looping and one-shot playback configurations inside the multi-tape preset. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to record back in my original minor pentatonic pattern. 3, 4. There we go. Cool. Okay, I'm going to set this to one-shot mode by holding retrig, pressing erase. And this has now set us to one-shot playback mode. I'm going to use my Lubadh pedal again. I'll patch from the A button output and put that into my retrig input. So now, if I trigger a playhead, it just runs once and loops, or doesn't loop, just one shot plays. I'm going to set my clock division to 1, and in one-shot mode it actually only produces a trigger pulse on the end of that one loop. So let's come from here, clock output. I can trigger a playhead, and I've essentially created a looping playback where the end of one playhead is triggering another. What you'll see there, as I triggered another few playheads, the clock output is derived from only the most recent playhead. So it means I can get a form of looping and it kills the multiple different playhead taps. So this is where things get particularly interesting with the one shot.
that was me adjusting speed, but you can hear once a tap plays, it sustains that speed value for its duration. So, as opposed to being dynamically fluid speed control, it's more like a sample and hold. When a tap is triggered, it's holding that speed value, speed and direction value. So I'll take out the retrig clock. So I'll just be manually clocking these grains. Not grains, playheads, although fundamentally, software-wise, they're much the same. Trigger, kill. So now if I trigger from my left hand, so as you can hear, when there's multiple playheads happening, like this is kind of breaking the laws of physics when you consider a copycat or a space echo delay, where I can have a playhead running with a unique speed of tape running through it. But then, as soon as I play another one, I've essentially got a parallel duplicate of this full tape reel that's then spinning at a different speed through an additional playhead. So it is essentially polyphonic playback. So I can distribute that between forward and reverse directions. So let's play about with this in a more real-time type situation. I'll quantize my grid quarter the length. That's half the length, and increase my clock rate. So I'm just using the TSL here as my playhead clock. And if I start recording, make sure dub is down. Try it with it up a bit. Let's add some tape emulation. A bit less. There we go. Now I'm going to vary the speed as I go. Use the same trick where I'm modulating speed with the sample and hold triggered by my note amplitude. So it's me just playing random notes in. But as I randomize it, I'm changing the speed at which the whole looping engine's running at. So it's varying the record speed, which will eventually normalize. So it's fine. There we go. So that's me on something quite quick. If I play
gently so as not to trigger the sample and hold. It's normalized in terms of pitch. But if there's rapid changes, then the taps that are playing back, they're essentially sampling holding their playback speed. So you can make for a lot more chaos with the same patch, but in one-shot mode as opposed to looping mode because of this sample and hold speed. Yeah, an impossible multi-tap delay with variable speed over independent playheads. Next up, we have the first of two sequencing-based presets, or presets optimized for sequencing. So these introduce 1 volt per octave tracking into the looper's functionality. I'm going to do something a bit different for this demonstration, and I'm going to go acoustic and capture in a single pizzicato pluck as our sound source for sequencing. I'm going to use the Lúbadh's built-in condenser mic. So I've got this set up. It's running through a 1047 filter just to roll off the highs a bit, keep it a bit smoother, remove any extra hiss because it's just a basic electric capsule microphone, but very functional for this sort of thing. Foot control, I've got the A pedal going to my record input and the B pedal going to erase. So this gives me start, stop, and erase. Stop and erase. Start, stop, and erase. Controlled from the foot pedal. So yeah, let's see how I can do this. Yeah, let's give this a go. I'm just going to start recording, pluck the D string, and hopefully that'll capture enough. So mute the microphone, sounding pretty clean. Bring the length down, and I'm just going to find the start of this pizzicato transient. Yeah, that's sounding good. Cool. Okay, so volt per octave, how is this implemented? We can see as I adjust the speed control, the playback of the loop is always remaining in forward direction. So this was a bit of a conundrum that we had to work around because the looper's playback engine fundamentally being through zero, being able to go through 0 hertz stalling to negative frequencies, negative reverse playback. That fundamentally can't work with volt per octave tracking, because if you just keep going down in 1 volt increments, going down in octaves, you can end up in negative infinite volts, but you're still only approaching 0 but never actually reaching it. So we had to force it to one direction only. Although there's a trick where we find a note. If I hold erase on the opposite deck and press erase on the current deck, we flip the direction, so we can actually have it tracking volt per octave with the sound reversed. So the speed CV input, that becomes our volt per octave input, and the CV actually sums with the pot position. So this defines our starting point, our fundamental note, and then we can extrapolate the pitch up and down from there. So this is original speed, indicated by the LED. I can then bring up 1 octave up, 2 octaves up, octaves below, 2 octaves below. The remaining range of the parameter going down to 0, this is where the volt per octave tracking, we had to extrapolate it a bit. So we wanted it to go all the way down to stalling. So stalling at 0, and then we've got mapping from there up to our first registered octave point. So that's 2 octaves below original.
And you can actually get an octave below this, but it'll be within the volt that is not actually tracking volt per octave naturally. Here we go. So the tracking will be not quite perfectly volt per octaves, but you can get down to those lower pitches. Okay, let's try some volt per octave tracking now. I'm going to use this knock as a clock source to clock this sample and hold. Let me move the violin out the way first. Okay, so let's use the end of cycle output, clock the sample and hold. It's actually sampling a triangle wave from the oct, and I'll sequence that through the harmony, and this is set to a minor pentatonic. I've also got it set to bipolar, so it's going to be adjusting the pitch around that center point, which is the 1 octave down. So we can hear the pitch adapting, but it's basically just changing the playback speed. So to get this more articulate, I'm going to hold retrig, press erase, and that's going to put it into one-shot playback mode. So now if I use my trigger source from the harmony, send that to retrig. Volt per octave tracking. I've currently got the left deck of this looper in clean mode, in the clean preset. So I'm just going to record a loop of this, shorten it down a bit, keep it tracking. The output normals to the input, so I'll bring that up a bit, and we're monitoring from the aux output. There we go. Nice bit of delay, just adds a bit of space. So there's a new time pot function for time pot 3. So we've got the yellow LED pulsing. It's a variable slew rate over the volt per octave control. So all the way down, there's no internal applied slew. And all the way up, we'll take it up to, I believe it's 300 milliseconds of a slew rate. That maximum can be tweaked inside the preset file as well. Tape emulation on my... Oh, that won't be tape emulation, that'll be crossfade duration. There we go. Volt per octave tracking on the looper. So next up, this is probably one of the more unusual presets. This is the SequencingPoly preset, which, as the name might suggest, it's a polyphonic version of the monophonic sequencing preset. Yeah, it's an idea I came up with and was experimenting with on the beta build. The fact that the Looper V2 engine's got 4 parallel playheads that can be played back from the same buffer polyphonically, it gave me the idea for trying to curate it in a way that you can use a single monophonic input voice recording to the loop essentially as a long wavetable, and you can perform dynamic harmonization to the playback. So for this example, I'm going to use the crewing into the 1047, so I think this might be the most traditionally synth voice example of this whole video. Okay, let's go. So this is essentially super saws through a low pass filter, and I'm just running that through this deck of my looper.
bring the depth all the way down and try and get that to just a more static sawtooth wave to start with. Okay, I'm just going to capture a length of loop. You can hear now it's doubling up that audio, so if I reach in my fundamental, then I can cause it to beat against this double up of the recording, or I can mute my input and we're hearing just the recording playing back. But where it gets interesting is if I vary the timbre of my source audio, capture this in, I've got dub level all the way down, so it's going to be constantly rewriting over the buffer. So we're always hearing a double up here. So what I'm going to do is play with the monitoring modes on the looper. So this key command is unchanged from the V1. So if I hold both top retrig buttons and press the record button, it will go from the standard, real-time monitoring. So you'll always hear the throughput signal. You can set it to armed monitoring mode. So now it's muted unless I engage the record button, in which case it's pulsing but not recording. Now it's recording, and you're always hearing the input source in addition. And then there's I'll record in silence again. There we go. And then there's no input monitoring. So white LED off, this means that I can have the input signal turned up, but we won't actually hear that coming through the looper as a dry signal. I'm now recording, and we only hear the playback of the audio. So it means that I can now vary the timbre, and there's essentially a delay of the length of the valid loop. But we're only ever hearing playback of it. So I will stop recording, and we'll just keep that as an example of the playback. And I'll kill the playhead. So this will work the same for one shot looping versus looping, or one shot versus looping. I'm going to demonstrate it using the harmony as my volt per octave control. So control wise, let me play this. I've not interacted with the speed knob yet, but if I now repitch it down 2 octaves. So this mode specifically is in volt per octave tracking mode. There we go, so that's playing it down 2 octaves. If I send my volt per octave in now, I've now got control above that 2 octave point, or below. I could I could pitch it down further. I'll use the gate output into retrig, and now it's maybe a bit too low. Let's take it up an octave. So what I did there, I just played 4 notes from my harmony, which gave me 4 gates triggering the 4 playheads, and I repitched it each time. So I played in a minor 7th chord, and it's now playing back 4 looping playheads. The pitch definition is sample and hold method for this preset. So anytime there's a new gate, it will play it back and hold that playback repitching. So where this gets interesting is if I start recording again. This mode's also using non-Varispeed recording, so fixed speed recording. So this is always going to be recording the input audio at original direction. So it means that I can now vary the timbre, and I'm essentially dynamically curating the wavetable, or the the long loop that all the taps are playing back from. So I can even repitch the entire oscillator. There will be a bit of a delay because of the length of the loop, and every tap, depending on its repitching, will have a different length that it plays for. So the way I can get around this and smooth this out a bit is start with a higher pitch overall, pitch down from my looper fundamentally. So anytime I would get a new tap playing, it's pitching down, so all the playheads are going to be playing slower than the record head. So that's quite critical to get this as smooth as possible in function. I'm going to reduce the length of my loop. So I'm going to pitch up a little bit more, pitch down. I'm going to increase my crossfade duration, and that should smooth things out a little bit. Set this back down to that 2 octave below position. It's a bit of a balancing act between getting the right fundamental pitch that's capturing in and the right ratio to repitching. So now let's automate my harmonization a bit more. In quantization mode, I've got this in a minor pentatonic, and I'm going to use the scion as my variable random voltage. I've got a little bit of slew applied. I'll bring sensitivity up a bit more, so this should be ticking over a bit more quickly. And it's just picking a random note out of this minor pentatonic. Slow down a bit. So you can see with a shorter loop length, I've got much quicker update of the reharmonization. So I can now change the fundamental of my now masked direct oscillator. We're only hearing the repitched playback version, but the length's short enough on my main loop that it's refilling the buffer fast enough that I don't have that much latency going on now. Let's use the other channels of the scion here. I'll bring the depth up, slew up on these last two channels, and I'll use this just to vary the timbre a little bit. make a bit less tonal, I'll just keep it to perfect intervals. So we've got root, octave, fourth and fifth. I've created layering of my monophonic source, just using polyphonic playback on the looper. Dynamic polyphonic harmonization from a monophonic source using short repeating loop as essentially as a wavetable. Next up, we've got a slightly more quirky preset. This is the Melontron preset, which, as the name may suggest, it's a tribute to the Melontron keyboard, which is a multiple parallel tape loop keyboard. You press a key, it's playing back a single one of multiple tapes, all recordings of individual notes. So you've got polyphonic playback from multiple tapes. So because the Looper V2 engine's got the capability of playing up to 4 taps polyphonically, then it made sense to try and mimic the behavior of the Melontron. So the way I'm going to use this, we've actually got a folder on the sample library, folder number 12, I believe. This has got a collection of single note samples that are all in C. There's one. Sustained guitar. What's this one? Some woodwind. There's a sustained piano note. Got brass instruments as well. I think that might be trombone, and this one might be trumpet. Yeah, I'm going to go with the trumpet one for this. I'll load that. There we go. So I've got the B button of my Lúbadh that's set to the erase jack, so that is that's killing any taps. That means that I can spam that button and mute. And I'm going to be not sequencing but controlling manually from the harmony. So root output, that's my volt per octave to speed. I'm actually going to start this up down 2 octaves. And I need the gate output, that is my trigger into the retrig input. So with the harmony in the drop 3 position for voicing, this actually gives me 3 octaves of range between root first and second inversion over the root output. So in the root position, that's at 0 volts. That's triggered this at the 2 octaves below point. An octave up. And another octave up. So the duration of the notes is going to be dependent upon the speed of playback. Also, this is in looping, so I'm going to kill these taps. There we go. And I'll set this to being in one-shot mode, where I can
trigger a tap, trigger a playhead, and it will just play that as a one-shot playback. So what I'm actually going to do as well, I'm going to monitor from this left deck. This is in a different mode, so I'll capture this in, keep it recording, and this should give me a nice delay effect. Speed up a bit there. Let's add some tape emulation to this. And go a mix between dry and wet for this delay effect. Okay, let's see how this goes. There's a little etude I was playing with, a little 4-part trumpet piece. Possibly not the most efficient instrument to play a polyphonic trumpet sample on, but yeah, I think it demonstrates the capabilities of the Melontron preset. Okay, the guitar's back. Last time, I promise. This is the penultimate preset. This is the octave delay, which is as you'd expect, a delay-based preset, or is optimized for working as a delay. But the speed control is pre-quantized to perfect octave divisions. So what I'm going to do, keep this in original speed. I'll take tape emulation down, and I'm just going to record an arbitrary length of loop. I'm making use of the internal analog normalization, so analog feedback, where the output of this deck normal's here, the output of this deck, normal's here. And I need to be continually recording here. As you can hear, this is just a default single tap delay. I've got the Lúbadh pedal, the B button patched to the erase jack, so that's given me the ability to kill all taps. No delay. And it's the sample and hold style of speed assigned to a tap or a playhead. So I've got this now in original octave, so if I tap this once, I could kill that tap. I could go in reverse. So I've now got a reverse swell delay. And then I can do that at multiple octaves in parallel. So this is now 2 taps playing one original speed but in reverse, and an octave up but in reverse. Let's increase the loop length a bit. So there's a couple of approaches for feedback. I could go to my dub level. And that's going to sort of sustain as it's doing sound on sound, and there's a retention of audio in the buffer. And this is retaining at the 2 octaves both in reverse approach. But if I take that down, so there's no internal feedback or dub level, if I now bring up my input on the other deck, so audio's just passing through here. I'll mute these taps, and I'll go with just forward direction 1 octave up. One octave up, here we go. go. I want to get it so it's not quite running away in positive feedback. So we've got this cascading feedback delay. Where the original octave is playing in, it's delaying, it's feeding back in analog, and then it's being pitched up. So we've got this sort of barber tone type octave shifting. There we are, that's a sort of shimmery tone. Let's go to time pot 3. So this is a tape emulation. Bring that up a bit. So this is adding a bit of deviation and fluctuation to the playback pitch. So we'll end up with closer to like a shimmer type effect. Kill these taps and let's do a mix of distributions. I'm going to go a reverse one, at original pitch. I'm going to go an octave up, forward, and let's go an octave below, forward. Increase the loop length a bit. Trying to see how far I can push the analog feedback level before it really starts to run away. Increase tape decay a bit more. Octave, pitch shifting, multi-tap, delay. Okay, here's our final preset. I've got it already loaded up and running one of the Fender Rhodes samples that's in the sample library, and I've just manually, by ear, matched it up to another drum sample, so that's playing on this looper. Loose tiny, but close enough. So this preset is called Broken Tape, and yeah, it's basically an emulation of if this was a really old, worn out, broken tape machine. So this entirely comes from the tape emulation, where the fundamental variables in the tape emulation, so tape wear and hysteresis, and they're basically ramped up to a ridiculous setting. So this is perfectly clean, and then as I bring up the tape emulation, it's really starting to slam it a bit. Okay, let's bring up audio from our drum loop. So this is the tape emulation that's getting applied on the input. So there's a compander built into this algorithm where you can hear as it's emulating the age of tape, then higher transients are more likely to retain and pass through. So the snare stays quite prominent. So you can kind of use this as a crude, broken VCA in some ways. Like, if you max out the tape emulation, then chances are you're going to limit most of the audio that's coming through. There's another detail as well, where for the most part in the presets for actually I think all the presets other than broken tape, the capacitive touch is disabled. Under the hood in the preset files, the text files, you're able to actually go in and differentiate different settings. So there are now two ways that the capacitive touch can respond. This is at stalling, so if it's touched, then you're holding the reel and stalling it. There's another one where it will just add a sort of pitch duck to it. Added some delay coming from this second deck. Broken tape. If you want your looper to sound broken, then there's a preset for that.